principal's recommendation.
Okay.
You got to successfully come up and interview with people who have been successful, experienced principals. You have to produce both a written and a videoed presentation of yourself and why you wish to be in this program and the things that you bring to the program. And I would suppose you also need to express in there the things you need to learn more about. That's the admission criteria. And there again, they're looking for anywhere from 18 to 25 candidates each year.
So the API is a coaching position. It's not an evaluation position.
No, sir. It is not intended to evaluate a person. It's intended to evaluate their skills relative to becoming a principal and coach them to improve the skills in which they need to improve to better their chances of being a principal.
So that tells me something entirely different. We've been talking about, I do these things and I'm evaluated on these things, but it doesn't matter how well I do on these things because I'm being coached, and as I'm coached, then I'll become better and better.
Yes, sir, exactly.
And at the end of the year, they're going to decide, hey, you did well enough that we're going to give you a graduate. We're going to give you a diploma.
And you might get a diploma and you might be told, but you need some more coaching in these things. One of the ones I'll use a specific example that has helped several people. Sometimes they'll say, you're not the best at presenting yourself and what you know. So we've sent people, suggested them, go to Toastmasters. They come back. Now they can articulate themselves in a whole different way. And they've been very successful with that. But that's a coaching at the end. Here, this might help you if you'll go and do this. And that's just one example. So they're not done at the end just because they did well in the process and they were coached. They may very well be left with, well, you need to continue to work in this area. You might consider going and doing these things. You need to seek opportunities at your school to engage in these kinds of activities, projects, or work to further hone your skills. It is a continual coaching.
Yes. I've just never considered this to be a coaching, and I'm glad you have pointed it out to me.
Yes, sir.
Because I was thinking that this whole thing is an evaluation.
No, sir.
That we're going to see if you do well enough to do this. What about the state requirements? I have got to be certified as a principal.
Certified as an administrator, certified as a principal. You have to have 3 years teaching experience to get that initial certification, and you have to have completed a master's level program, and it has to have had certain classes contained within it. But if you go to any of the in-state schools and you get a master's degree in school administration, it would have the appropriate coursework with it.
Have we ever compared the coursework for Clemson and the coursework for South Carolina?
The coursework at Clemson is far more rigorous.
I knew that was coming.
I don't know any better endorsement to give you than that. You know, I've been to both places. So.
I know.
And you know where you got your hire.
Well, there you go. No, there's not, I don't know of any comparison that's done between different institutions of higher education. They all have to be certified by NCATE,
Yeah.
which is their accrediting body for colleges of education. So they have to meet those standards.
If the required courses were the same.
They're pretty much the same because they have to have had.
How can I find out what those required courses are from Clemson or South Carolina? Can I go online and do that?
You can probably go online and look at that. We can probably pull them for you and send them to you. They're going to be very similar. Okay.
Is he looking to go back to school?
He's already got his, I think.
Mr. Stubbs, without objection, we'll extend for another 10 minutes.
I am through. I appreciate Ms. Cap for your extensive putting up with me. And Dr. Royster's used to it. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Seth. Mr. Meek.
Thank you. Well, Pat sort of stole my thunder right there at the end. I had a question for Dr. Royster. If he had two successful candidates with equal qualifications and had been successful, one from USC and one from Clemson, who'd get the job?
You better be careful the way you answer
Just can't imagine them being equal. If one of them came from USC, one of them came from.
I know, you have class and you have redneck, so which one would get it? Whoa, shit.
Thank you, Dr. Ross, that's my question.
I think we've got a good record of hiring people from both ends of the state there.
We do.
Audit that.
And with that, I think that concludes item 3.02, and we will move on to item 3.03, coaching model of principal leadership. Dr. Royster.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. Ms. Cap's going to present this as well, but I'm going to give her just a couple minute break because I think it's important, and I shared this internally with some of our folks the other day. Before we talk about principal leadership and how we ask our assistant superintendents to supervise and coach principal leadership, I think it's good for us to look back at how we came to be where we are. Some of you will remember this, others will not. Some of you have lived through some of it, and others are relatively new to hearing this kind of discussion. But if you start here with the third picture, Dr. Hall, in 1970, or thereabouts, the school district was organized by administrative areas. At one time there were 5. For most of the time that there were administrative areas, there were 4. Each was led by an area assistant superintendent. There were area offices, and in each office there was a miniature version of the academic staff that Mr. McCoy has at the district office now. And there was also a district academic staff. Back then they would have called it an instructional staff. Each one of those area assistant superintendents ran their area almost like a superintendent would run an individual school district, so long as it fit within the overall pattern that the superintendent had established. It did not allow for great consistency, however. So you think back to 1970, you had these 5, then 4 geographic areas, each headed by in effect, a local superintendent. If you come on around the corner and you get to, I believe, Dr. Jenny there, who's right behind Ms. Bush, Dr. Jenny, who did not have a long tenure in the district, but made a number of changes in the district while he was here, changed that system from a decentralized system of areas to the forerunner of what we have now, but it didn't look like what we have now. There were people who supervised the principals. And if you come on around the wall, over time, those people were called by different titles. At one point, I think they were almost completely eliminated, and the principals were reporting to a degree to the superintendent. Dr. Fisher brought back, during her tenure, the idea of supervising by level. A lot of the history from here to there were people who were the directors of principal accountability. It was about accountability. It was almost exclusively about accountability, instructional accountability, school level accountability. A number of years ago, there were 2 elementary and 1 secondary person. So you can imagine the number of schools for which they were responsible and the number of principals for which they were responsible. At one time, there were 100 schools in Greenville County. There are now 84 regular schools in Greenville County. And we have 3 elementary assistant superintendents for school leadership, a middle school assistant superintendent for school leadership, and a high school one. And they supervise anywhere from 14 to 17, maybe 18 principals. But they don't just supervise for purposes of accountability. We've tried in the last several years, beginning with Dr. Fisher's tenure and into mine, to move them from just being accountability people to being individuals who help to coach as well as supervise and hold principals accountable. Well, if you're coaching, as we heard from that discussion earlier, that's a lot more intensive, a lot more time-consuming, but produces greater results than just measuring something at the end of the day, which was, if you revert back to the accountability piece, that's what you're doing. You're measuring something at the end of the day and then trying to improve it for the next year. So our whole idea now, our whole construct is around the idea of coaching principals to be better leaders, correcting that which might be wrong or incorrect, but the bigger picture, the greater responsibility is coaching individuals to be better principals. Well, there are some issues with doing that. One is we've been in a model for a long time where that was not what we were doing. We were holding people accountable. And you have to hold people accountable, and that's still a component of the job. The other thing is, as we are in so many other areas different from the rest of the state, there's no one else our size. There might be some districts where there's a person who supervises principals, perhaps two. But we have now 5 people carrying out that role. So while we want to allow for individual differences, we also need to have consistency among our coaching, and especially when you go back to the accountability and evaluation side, in order to be equitable and fair with people, we want to make sure we have a consistency in how we evaluate and look at performance. So that we've known for a while that that was an area that we needed improvement in, that we needed growth in, not because people weren't willing to do that, not because people weren't committed to doing that, because we didn't really have a model that lent itself to that. So a couple of years ago, I had the opportunity at the AASA conference to see a presentation that was in great part based on the University of Washington's work in principal leadership and supervision of principals, endorsed by AASA, the School Administrators Association, and in use now in a lot of larger districts throughout the country. And really what that model does is create a consistency for the coaching, the supervision, the evaluation, and the holding accountable of principals. Well, having seen that and gotten more information about it and read about the work that had been done there, and it lines up perfectly with the things that we try to do with our principals for instructional leadership and how we want them to lead their buildings. Without going into great detail about the process, but when I was talking to Ms. Kapp about the job she's currently in, and one of the things I asked her about was not just staff development and what we've traditionally thought of staff development, but develop.
Because every now and then Leroy would say, they say confession is good for the soul. So I'll start with a confession. I was less than enthusiastic when we were approached initially about this training. I'll tell you that. I really was. As some of you know, because you've been sitting on the board almost as long as I've been in this position, I've been in this position for 22 years. So when Karen came and talked with us as a group initially about training for principal supervisors, I thought, I know how to supervise principals. I've done it for a while. I think I know what to do. Plus, I'm in PD all the time. We get to select the PD that we need. We are well read. I think I'm good. Well, we were going to do the training. That was decided, and I understand that now. It only took me one day of the 8 required days, full days of PD that were a part of this program to realize this is important. This is significant. Sometimes you don't know what you don't know, and this was one of those instances for me. As Dr. Royster shared with you earlier, we have evolved as principal supervisors over time. When I first came to the position in 1995, it was with Dr. Tim Jenny. It was on the cusp of moving from those 4 areas and centralizing the principal supervisor support to schools. And at that time, and in many of the ensuing years, the focus was on accountability. Here's what you're expected to do. Are you doing these things? Let's check it off the list. Let's move forward. If you're not doing it, here's what we're going to do. And while along the way, of course, we were doing some coaching, it was not nearly to the depth and extent and as organized and focused as it has become, particularly with this model that we have put in place. I would say that it's the most meaningful and relevant PD that I have had for this position. In fact, it is the only professional development that was specifically geared, or has been, because it continues, to the position of principal supervisor. So it's been a very positive experience in that regard. It has required a tremendous amount of time. That was one of the concerns that I had. Students are in school 180 days, and you mean we're going to do 8 full days to this training? Well, what I didn't understand as a part of that, too, is that a significant amount of that training was on site. It was actually in the school. It was actually working side by side with the principal and visiting classrooms and having the discussion that we needed to have. You heard both Dr. Royster and Karen Kapp talk about the fact that we are moving from the telling mode to the coaching mode. I really was not aware of how much I was telling. I was doing a lot of telling, and probably, obviously, need to do more coaching because it's about increasing the capacity of the leadership of the principal. As we have already stated, second only to the teacher with student achievement is the ability and the instructional leadership of the principal. So after that initial session with Sandy Austin, one of the next steps for us, principal supervisors, those of us participating in this PD, was actually that on-site work. And I want to share just a little bit about what that first experience was for me and for Deborah Johnson. Deborah Johnson, Cherrydale principal, is the principal who agreed to work with me, and she was just wonderful. She was a wonderful support to me. Every session that I sat in with Deborah, I reminded her that this was my training, not hers. And of course, she will tell you how much she grew too, though, as a part of this experience. But anyway, the very first session where we actually sat one-on-one with the principal, we the principal supervisor, we had an audience. We had an audience of about, Deborah and I had an audience of about maybe 8 individuals, including all of the principal supervisors, Karen Kapp, Dr. Gary, Jeff McCoy, Charlotte McDavid, and also someone from Clemson University, and of course Sandy Austin. So there we sat, the principal and I, going through this protocol, through this process, where we talked about the data. We really analyzed that school data. She did that, she, the principal, before we got to the table. We'd already had some conversation, but we looked to get to what was the root cause of the issue. And the issue that we targeted was reading. It was reading. The students at Cherrydale Elementary, what was the greatest learning problem based on the student performance data from the previous spring? It was very evident to us that it was reading. So then the next question for Deborah was, she said, Deborah, what about reading? She said, well, it's reading comprehension. The next question to Deborah was, what about reading comprehension? You know, in the past, we would stop there. It's reading comprehension. What specifically is it about reading comprehension? She had to really think about that. She had to go back and have some additional conversation, look more closely at the data. And at that point, she said it was guided reading. Well, what about guided reading? What is it about guided reading? So we continued to narrow the focus until we got to the root cause of the issue. The next step was, so that's the student learning problem. What is the teacher problem of practice? What do the teachers need to do different to meet that specific need of the students? And so we followed that up then with something we called an instructional protocol. We did a round. We went through the classrooms and observed, doing guided reading time. We looked at the data and were able to then target conversation also with teachers, was a part of that, specifically target what the teachers needed in the realm of PD to meet the student need. Then the next level for Deborah and me was, so Deborah, what is it that you need to do? What do you need to do as principal to address that specific need that or problem of practice that the teachers have so that the teachers can more effectively meet student need? And so that's how the process began for us. That's how we ended up deciding on our goal. That's how we moved forward. And as has already been said, as Deborah and I continue to work through that process with classroom visits, with follow-up conversations with teachers, with professional development for teachers and for Deborah, what stayed in my mind was, I'm not going to tell. I'm going to ask those important questions and help us get to where we need to be. In addition to that, as has already been said as well, for my colleagues and I at this level, we have, I would say we are more collaborative than ever as we go through this work because we're all working from a common template and model. So we can provide support to each other as we move forward. We know that the work that we're doing is research-based. We know that it's focused. We know that what we're doing is data-driven, and I think I can speak for everybody else that's a part of this process, I believe that the difference is going to be increased capacity and strengthening the leadership skill of our principals as we move forward. So I'm grateful, actually, that Dr. Royce was insistent that we participate in this, and I am seeing the difference that it makes. I just hate that it's 22 years later than it used to be. Anyway, thank you.
Awesome.
I was just discovering how difficult it is to come behind somebody who's done this position since you were a sophomore in high school. So the tremendous wealth of knowledge that Dr. Meekins shares with us on a daily basis is great. Just had to do the math. She'll get me back later. Thank you for the opportunity to share our experience this morning with the UWCEL work. It has been a great experience to have this opportunity being new in this role this year. One of the things that was very important to me very early on was to understand each of the middle schools with whom I work and understand the needs of those principals and more specifically what it was going to take to really move those schools forward. We wanted to work on really identifying the specific areas and items that needed to be addressed in the schools to help those principals build their capacity. And this work has done just that for us. This gives us a solid framework to work from. It gives us common language. As Dr. Meekins shared, it is wonderful to be able to collaborate with others and put your heads together on how do we address these needs of these principals? How do we help them recognize their strengths, but also recognize their challenges as leaders in the schools? So we've built a lot of focus this year around being very goal-focused. So we're looking at those goals constantly. We lay those in front of our principals. We work through those goals with them, and we help them develop high-quality, high-impact strategies for achieving those goals. As we look at just the number of areas that we could choose to have the highest impact on the school, and certainly in helping that principal be a better leader within that school. We look at those strengths and those needs. I think that's a lot of what this process is about, is asking the principal to reflect, asking them to really think through their experiences and think about those challenges that they have in achieving their goals. For me, it's been wonderful to be able to work with principals this year. The one that I chose as my sort of test subject was a first-year principal, working with Dr. Anderson at Tanglewood Middle School. Dr. Anderson has 1,000 ideas a minute. His brain works very quickly. So sometimes we work to slow down the thinking so that we can have a much more high-impact, high-quality product. But it was wonderful working with him, getting to know him, understanding his goals for Tanglewood Middle School, understanding his perspectives of what he was working with in the school, and really helping him focus on achieving some very laid out, methodical ideas For example, what we worked on with Tanglewood Middle School was identifying what are those high-quality practices that we should see when we observe classrooms, particularly in language arts classrooms. So what we had to work from was if we could identify those practices, we could explain that to our students, we could get our teachers to do those things, we could change what we saw in language arts classes at Tanglewood. And so over the course of the year, he and his team really worked to identify what are those intentional practices that should happen in that language arts class. And what we saw was really a solid building of the staff. We really brought those teachers to a point where they too could have that common language, where they would understand collectively what it is that we needed to see in a classroom each time we were there. And more importantly, there's one student who every time I visit Tanglewood, she finds me. I'm not quite sure how, but sometimes I wonder why she's out of class. But she always finds me and remembers the day that we visited her language arts class. And I walked up to her and I asked her about what she was learning and why was it important. And she always says, "You're that man that asked me what I was learning and why was it important?" And I said, "Yes, I am. So what did you learn today in language arts?" So just helping our kids recognize what part they play in this concept of coming to that common purpose and that common mission to reach these goals has been really exciting. For me, this process has really been neat to watch principals grow, to help them really hone their skills and excitement. We've also been able to identify those specific needs for resources, looking at what our principals need. Are there additional trainings or supports or opportunities that we can provide to help them be more successful? That part has been really neat. It's also helped me develop what are those next steps. So as we closed out the year, we spent a lot of time in our monthly principals meetings really looking at some systems level ideas. So when we talk about scheduling, what does that look like? We spent some time talking about just how do we approach the start of the next year. So one of the things that has grown from this is that going into next year, and actually tomorrow, I'll be spending the day meeting with assistant principals and principals from the middle school level to talk through developing their theories of action for the fall. So what are those first things that they're going to address as soon as school starts back in August? We're going to spend some time really identifying some of those practices that they perceive as issues, but also those that we know that are concerns that need to be looked at. And so we'll have a nice framework for them to come back to in August and really give them those structures and supports across the district. So all 19, soon to be 20, folks in the middle school group will have a solid plan of how they can achieve raising student achievement. And more importantly, making sure that we have those structures and supports in place in our schools to make all of our principals successful so that they in turn will help our teachers be more successful, so that they in turn will ensure that all of our kids get the best possible experience. Thank you.
So you'll see not only that the experience was meaty and substantive for the principal supervisors before you, but that they are turning those practices into a broader audience to be able to apply those supports to all of their principals. This work is student-centered. It is intended to change and to impact student learning. It's deliberate, data-driven, evidence-based, and planned. It targets a specific change in principal practice, balances supervision, coaching, and evaluation for growth. It aligns support by academics, assessment, HR, and other central office divisions, and it supports the real work that improves student learning. We asked our principals, those who partnered with us as we learned, what they learned and how they developed as instructional leaders. We want to share with you their comments, and I hope that you will notice as you listen to their remarks the side-by-side nature of the relationship between supervisor and principal and how the ongoing work together grows those principals as instructional leaders.
In what ways did coaching with your supervisor help you grow as an instructional leader? It helped me really pinpoint a specific problem at a specific grade level.
For me, participating in the coaching with my supervisor allowed me to grow professionally as a learner and as a leader.
I became a better observer of small guided group reading lessons. I knew exactly what to look for. I was more intentional.
So it solidified what I was doing in terms of instruction in my building, but it also allowed me to strengthen the relationship that I had with my supervisor, Dr. McDonald.
Working with my supervisor, we were able to define a clear, succinct focus of our problem of practice here in the building.
It allowed me to have a model with my supervisor, Mr. Reimer, where we interacted as instructional leaders, and then I could take that same model and apply that with my own assistant principals and have those same conversations, which in turn provided them a model that they can have those same conversations with department heads and teachers.
The coaching process just was very intentional, and it gave me an opportunity just to slow down and collaborate with my supervisor and pull out the data and be very clear about what we knew the needs were and then what we were going to do to address some of the things that we thought were the most important for entry.
Have another set of eyes, kind of see if we're both seeing the same thing within the data, and also are we both seeing the same thing within the classroom, a type of inter-rater reliability.
Was to really focus down to the student level and what they would look like if we were approaching the problem perfectly. That was a great way to approach the issue.
How does that problem impact kids? How does it impact students at the core? And so this process, especially in regards to literacy, which was our problem of practice, how does the problem of literacy in our building not only impact me as a principal and what I do and how I provide professional development for my teachers, and not only how my teachers provide instruction to their students, but what is that outcome?
I was also able to set clear expectations for what guided reading should look like in the classroom.
It made leading, it made teaching alongside with my teachers, it made it very easy for us once we knew what the problem was and how we can go about solving that problem. It made the work much easier with a clearly defined purpose.
And then it also helped my teachers to see that this wasn't just something I was pulling out of the air to talk with them about or to address, that this was a data-driven decision and that my supervisor and myself were both on the same page, that we had the same goals and the same vision, which is the district's vision.
So going forward, UWCEL, or the Center for Educational Leadership, will be back with us again in Greenville next year for a period of time. We're going to further develop our teaching and coaching practices. We're going to transfer this teaching approach to working with groups and principal learning communities over time. We'll be training veteran principals to mentor and coach early career principals. We have a cohort of 16 principals who begin training in the fall to learn an aligned model of this coaching practice so that they can support first and second year principals to a stronger start in their own schools. This will also allow us to expand the leadership capacity of our veteran principals in this model. I mentioned to you earlier, and Dr. Meekins captured it as well, that time is a critical factor in principals' ability to be in classrooms working alongside their teachers and ensuring that instruction is meeting the targets. One of the ways, as recommended in the research, that time is made more available to school principals is by the central office working on its own practices to ensure that logistical practices or administrative procedures are not taking more time or an inordinate amount of investment and detail than is necessary to be effective with the task at hand. So we will embark on a project, a design project in the fall with our human resources and finance departments. They will come together and they will look at the processes that principals tell them are cumbersome or take a good bit of time to be able to accomplish. Those two departments will be working together to determine the targeted changes that they can make so that principals are freed from too much obligation in those areas, and that they have more time to support instruction in their buildings. So this is, as Dr. Royster mentioned to you, it's a unified approach. It comes from the student all the way up to the principal's practice, the principal supervisor supporting, and the central office supporting all of that work, so that time on instruction is where we are devoted. So all of that is very critical. Where do we want to be? Early on in our research about this project, we checked with multiple school districts to determine what benefits they were seeing in the implementation of a coaching model. Superintendent Ransom in South Dakota sums this up best. His approach is from the classroom up, student problem of learning, teacher problem of practice. They're working with principals to design supports for teachers that move students forward. Their supervision is supportive, capacity building, operating within a continuum of skill, impacting culture, achievement, and leadership capacity for all. So in closing, we believe that a balance of supervision and support, along with help from the central office, creates the conditions that will develop and retain highly effective school leaders, those who will improve the experience for students and raise achievement for all. Thank you. I am open to questions or clarifications.
Thank you very much. Roger Meek was our first speaker.
I get to go first. Wow. Ms. Capps, during my stay on the board, I've seen many principals and many teachers, and just like athletes, I've seen many athletes, and it seems like that athletes, along with teachers and principals, there's a lot of natural teachers and principals that really fit the mold, just like athletes are greater than others. And I think in the past we have been very lucky to hire quite a few great teachers and principals, and I'm glad to see that we're going to coach them further. I really don't have much of a question, except I take exception to Dr. McDonald. You know, I guess he was in middle school when I come on board. And I remember when Dr. Meekins got her position here. So I don't know if that's saying a whole lot or not, but I think we did get some winners back then. The superintendents, I think I've known 5 or 6 of them and worked with 5 or 6 of them, and we picked some good winners over the years, and I hope the district in the future will pick good winners to succeed the superintendents that we have had and can continue this program. I'm glad to see that it's evolved over the years, and I think it is to the better. I remember the district offices. I remember the own little, I called them little kingdoms back in 1994, because they were set up as their own little district in the four sub-districts that we had. And I think they worked great, but I think what Dr. Royster said was correct, that the district didn't work as a district. They worked as 4 separate districts. And so I think it's great. I think we have achieved many things throughout this district in the last 20 years, and I know that we will continue. So thank you for your fine work. I was going to ask you, did you graduate from Clemson or USC? No, I'm asking Karen. I asked Karen.
You were going to ask me?
Yeah.
There you go. I'm actually an Erskine grad and a Furman master's.
Okay. I just wondered if you went to Clemson and know how I got your job, but thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Meek, for your years of experience and expertise. Mr. Sailors.
I heard an uh-oh over there. Just one quick question. How do we measure success for this program, and what's the timeline for doing so?
The measure of success in this program is going to be the increasing instructional leadership skills of the principals as measured in their own evaluation processes. Those processes actually involve 3 conferences annually and written summaries of their work and their growth. This is designed to support principals to become better instructional leaders. Now, it's probably important to know that instructional leadership is not a narrow, it does not encompass just a narrow set of things, being in the classrooms, just doing that. It involves a lot of things that further instructional development and achievement in schools. But all of those things are going to be measured through the improving skills of our principals, the improving achievement at their schools. As we continue down this path, we will expand the number of principals who can be coached. We learned this year and chose 1 focus principal each. But in subsequent years, we will be able to potentially do shorter cycles for a targeted purpose and offer those opportunities to multiple principals. And of course, not every principal will be coached every year. So part of the learning of those structures is to further that. But the proof of the pudding is going to be the change in leadership practice and improved student achievement in our schools.
So you'll be able to determine essentially success on an individual by individual basis?
Yes, that would be fair to say.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Sailors. Ms. Goodwin-Caldwell.
Kudos for his professional development, because I know whenever we hire people, we say we want highly qualified, but we have to get them in and train them for them to be highly qualified. I know some people come out of school thinking that they're highly qualified, but we have to train them. So kudos on that. Who is the PD conducted by that they went through?
The professional development comes from the University of Washington Center for Educational Leadership. You heard Dr. McDonald, and I think maybe Dr. Meekins mentioned Sandy Austin. She is the consultant who comes in. She's a project director with University of Washington, and she comes here to provide on-site training and support with us.
Okay, is this part of the PASA for the principals or for the administration? Is this going to be part of that, or how is that going to fit into that as far as evaluation?
This is coaching of individual principals on their site to grow their skill, and the principal supervisors who apply this coaching model, and it of course will permeate all that they do, working one-on-one with any principal over time. This is all targeted to improve the skills that are evaluated under PASS A, or what we call PDEP, under the state evaluation guidelines. So very recently, we solidified our high priority practices for principals, and we did that based out of the state PDEP model, or the PASS A. We did that out of all of those standards, and we developed guiding questions in order to use with those principals to coach on, to be able to have those one-on-one conversations, to be able to hold group sessions with principals centered around a particular standard or a particular area of leadership, so that we could deepen their skills and they could also reflectively seek out support for those skills.
I know I've heard ADEP. But what is PDEP?
PDEP, I don't know if I can say it all. It's the performance assessment system for school administrators. I can't tell you what PADEPP says, but that's what it is.
So is that in conjunction with the PASS A?
When you say PASS A, that's what it is. But that's the state's name for it.
PDEP's a state-required evaluation of school-level administrators of principals. And Greenville County chose a number of years ago to implement its own version.
Right.
So our version was Pass A.
Okay.
Pass A had to contain all the same measures that the state's version had. The most recent iteration of the state's version of now what they call PDEP reflects in large part what we were already doing in Pass A. So we use more what the state uses as a whole as opposed to our own that was very customized. Theirs became more like ours, I guess is one way to look at it.
Okay, so all administrators using PDEP?
Principals.
What about the associate superintendents? Do they what kind of evaluation tool do they go through?
For their own evaluation?
Yeah, for that position.
There is an evaluation instrument for professional staff, and that's the one with which they are evaluated. There is not a statewide evaluation for anyone other than teachers and principals.
So that is something that is Greenville grown.
Yes.
It's not. So do they not have a state evaluation system like the PDEP or like the Pass A for administrators?
No.
That would be for the superintendents?
There is no state level evaluation for any position beyond school level principal.
Dr. Royster, I could speak to what we have done with this work this year to adapt our district's evaluation of principal supervisors.
Okay.
Part of the work we did this year when we studied the standards for principal supervision is we studied very deeply what those meant in practice, what those looked like well done, and about a month or so ago adopted these principal supervisor standards as our own. We adapted them a bit to fit Greenville. We adopted them as our own, and they will be part and parcel of the evaluation model for the principal supervisors and those who supervise those directors at sites that serve students in any form going forward. That is an in-progress project, but those standards form the basis for all of the growth and assessment of the work of the principal supervisors going forward.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Goodwin-Carlisle. Dr. Ball O'Connor.
Thank you. I just wanted to compliment all of you who have presented and worked on this, and especially to say to Dr. Meekins how nice it was to hear the notion that there's something wonderful to learn after this much time of doing this job. And the specific example you gave about reading instruction and the discussions you had rather than just telling and asking the right questions, and how you moved down through the level of the conversations that need to take place was extremely important and helpful to understanding, and I believe that is exactly right in terms of what will make the greatest difference is those kinds of conversations, and the example was extremely helpful. So thanks to all of you. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Ball O'Connor. Ms. Bush.
Yes. A couple of my questions have already been answered, but I wanted to take the opportunity to say thank you, and what a thank you to all of you on the team and going forward, and looks like what a success you've made of it already, and I'm excited to see where we go from here, because I can see your excitement and that whole aha moment of as Dr. Meekins said, that you don't know what you don't know, and I think we can all learn from that statement. And just the opportunity to thank the administration for Dr. Royster for continuing to steer us in that direction, as you talked about, as we went around the wall on the superintendents and how leadership kind of adapted in it. And I'll go back to when I came on this board and I was a sophomore in high school, to use Dr. McDonald's and how before that, as a PTA, as a very dedicated PTA person, and my view on principal leadership at that time in Greenville County was the fact that if you were at the end of a successful coaching career, you got promoted to principal, because that seemed to be to the public that every principal at that time was coach. You always referred to them as coach, which I understand that the leadership skills are parallel, probably to a football game. If you had the ability to organize young men on a field and have a winning season and have the parents under control and all of those skills that go along with being a football coach, that did steer you toward that great goal of getting to retire and be principal, getting to retire from the football coach. So seeing us go from those days of that was kind of a prerequisite to be a principal to the principal actually being the instructional leader. When we wonder, why school's not doing good, and when I look back at those areas that we used to have, and they indeed were, as my colleague Mr. Meek referred to them as kingdoms or different districts, because I felt like as a mother with children in the school at that time, that the expectations in one district were totally different. Even the principal leadership, it seemed like every time I became familiar with a principal, it was a lot of times it was either their performance level was not high enough to be in one of the other three districts, or that they were getting ready to retire, and it was you move to this district because number one, the expectation is not as high, and you can kind of sell out and take it easy. You don't, and I've seen that change completely top in now to new principals, and some of those that we talked about this morning, wanting to go to a district that has challenges, wanting to go to those districts, because that's where, and when I've spoken to those and I've said, what made you want to come? What made you want to look at this particular school that's in my area? And is that they feel like they can make such an impact. They see great need in their ability, as Dr. Royster said, to identify, and that comes with that coaching, that need to identify with the students and the community and with you in your leadership capacity, to what is the problem, to go down and say, how are we going to get better? Where are we going to go from here? And so it is so exciting, as to be able to sit here and, as Dr. Ball O'Connor said, after 22 years, to be able to sit here and be excited about something that's taken place, and looking forward to see the results that I know are only going to be fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bush.
Thank you, Ms. Bush. Ms. Leventis Wells.
Karen, thank you so much for your presentation, and all of you. Sometimes when you begin a process that you don't believe in, and you're not positive about the direction, then it will reflect that. But Michelle, when you owned up to that skepticism and then stated that, you know what, this really is great. Well, I can only imagine Dr. Jennings when he said, we're going to do different. We're going to change this district. We're not going to do these 4 separate areas. We're going to combine. And then everybody was probably had a little bit of skepticism in their minds, but it worked. And then I appreciate on a number of occasions all that Dr. Royster has done with his vision for the district. and how all of you have embraced the different tasks that you've been given to implement this throughout our schools, because you are our leaders. He is our leader, and you are his leaders, and he believes in you to go out and make sure that everybody's on board and that we're doing the right things for our people in these schools to do the right things for their students and to educate them. So I'm very appreciative of this presentation and the one before. And even though if you were in middle school or high school when we got to be where we are, it's okay, because you know what? That's how times change. Because if you had been back in the day, you still wouldn't be where you are today. You'd be still in the classroom probably teaching and not even a principal. So just know that times have changed for the betterment of our students and our schools and so forth. And the vision of our leaders are what give me hope that we're in a good place. We're in a great place. We're not in a good place. We're in a great place. And when we joke about Clemson and Carolina and all of our schools, it's in good fun. I mean, after all, my dad went to Clemson. So I love Clemson. I love Carolina. I love Furman. I love all of our schools. And I love all the opportunities that our students have to go and further their education once they leave Greenville County School District. So Karen, thank you for your presentation. Thank you all for your presentations, because it was very impressive. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Levinas-Wells.
Thank you, Ms. Levinas-Wells. I think that was our final speaker, and if so, that would conclude our section. I will turn the mic back to Dr. Ball O'Connor.
And I would now turn the gavel to Mr. Sailors for the Buildings and Grounds portion of our agenda.
Thank you, Dr. O'Connor. If I can get this computer to agree with me this morning. Don't panic back there. I figured it out. Okay. First item on the agenda for for the Building and Grounds portion of the meeting is item 4.01, informational presentation only related to the facilities project report. Does anyone have any questions for Mr. Mills?
Yes.
Mr. Sutton.
Mr. Mills. How the two roof replacements for Duncan Chapel and Gateway, how long did those roofs last? And when were they put on?
The roof, I don't know the exact number of years, but the roof on Duncan Chapel is the original roof that was on the school, and I believe it was built 1998 time frame. The roof on Gateway Elementary School, I'm not sure. I think this is the second roof that's been on that facility, and I believe it was built back in the late 70s, early 80s. I can get that information for you.
If it's 20 years.
Yes, sir. Both roofs. I think
that's a good lifetime for a roof.
Yes, sir. I think we've gotten the estimated life out of both of those roof systems.
Okay. And the Malden High School, a partial roof replacement?
Yes, sir.
What do we mean by partial?
The roof at Malden High School, it's a very large facility. We're doing it in phases. There'll be a phase one, which we're working on this summer. Will run until approximately the end of October, and then we will do phase two starting in June of next summer. It's just too large of a facility for us to try to do it all at one time, and we're trying to eliminate the interruption to the instructional process there.
How long did that roof last?
That roof was put on in the late 90s, so we've gotten about 20 years out of that roof system also. Part of the phase that we're going to do next summer is on the new 3-story portion of the building, but the other roof was an existing roof that was there when the school was remodeled in the early 2000s.
And my last question. On athletic projects, do all high schools and middle schools have press boxes?
None of our middle schools have press boxes, and our high schools that have press boxes were built originally by the booster clubs, and they've been, if we built a new high school and there was an existing press box there, we replaced it with a new press box. So no, sir, not all of them have them.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Sudduth. Ms. Goodham-Caldwell.
Terry,
Yes.
the Carolina High School, the courtyard shade structure, it will be ready for when they come back to school, correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is our intention. I tried to make a call to the architect this morning, and I wasn't able to get them, but it is under contract, and I believe the drawings of the cloth portion of it, the tent portion of it has been sent to the architect for their approval, but I wasn't able to speak with them this morning. But I will follow up with you on that. But yes, it's supposed to be completed in early August.
Okay. The digital signs for, you said you have it here for 3 locations. Do all of the schools have digital signs now? Or how can they get them if they don't have them?
No, ma'am. I don't believe all our schools do. Those are funded by the schools with local funds. The schools can apply for matching district funds, and we spend a lot of our district matching funds go to the schools to put with their local funds for these signs.
So they have to apply for a match?
Yes, ma'am.
But they have to provide, is it half? It's 50-50?
It's a 3-to-1 match.
We also have traditionally provided the electrical connection for them at our expense, and Terry's project folks will manage the project for them as well. So
Right.
those are kind of, I guess, contributions in kind.
And we normally try to design the signs, the signs that we provide for the schools so that lighted background can be pulled out and the digital sign can fit in there, and there's power and data that's pulled out to those signs when we build them. So it's easy to pull it out and insert the electronic sign.
So the schools that were built as part of the BEST program, all of the signs, even though they were not digital, they do have the capacity for you to make it.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Sign.
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Meek.
Thank you, Mr. Sailors. Terry, the painting, the 11 locations, is that the first time they've been repainted since they were built, new or renovated?
Greenview Child Development Center, possibly, because that school is not that old. Carolina, I believe, we're on a 10-year rotation for schools. We've actually been able to up that. We're like closer to 8.5 to 9 years now. Okay. A number of schools we've gone in and done an assessment of what's required, and we have prematurely, and earlier is what I'm referring to, have painted some of the hallways and some of the high use areas, high abuse areas in schools, but we're on a 10-year rotation to go through and paint everything in the school. That would be the classrooms and the halls, but we are running ahead of schedule on that. We were able to do that because of the money we had budgeted for these projects during the recession, and we got some really fantastic pricing on a square foot basis to paint the school. So we were doing, like I said, we were moving ahead and cutting that 10-year down. painting prices have definitely come back into line, and they're actually ahead of where they were in the pre-recession. So I think we're going to see these things pull back into the 10-year time frame again.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I can't answer these things individually, but when I look at most of these schools, most of them seem to have been in the BEST program, and they seem to have rolled up on that 10-year time frame.
Okay. Do they go back in and do the caulking? I know those prefab.
The precast?
Yeah.
We look at the precast from time to time, and we have it set up for money to do that on a 5-year basis to look at it. And if it requires caulking, we will entirely recaulk the school or do maintenance caulking on it. And if there's a situation that comes up where we see a caulking issue in a school, we don't wait. I mean, it's a maintenance item. It's done.
Okay. I know that was part of, if I remember correctly, that they were saying that they had to go back in every so years and caulk them again.
With that caulk, if properly installed, properly specified, should last about 15 to 20 years.
Okay. The paving at Serene Stadium, that's the parking lot at the stadium, right?
Yes, sir. The parking lot, I don't know when it was originally paved, but it was failing. I mean, just almost total failure of the parking lot. It was all gated up. There was water was intruding down into the base. The area in front of the main driveway and in front of the main entrance to the stadium had failed. It was light duty asphalt, and they had delivery trucks delivering the concessions and stuff to the school. Had just failed over time.
Well, that new condos they built right there with the TD Bank drive-through used that parking lot.
Yes, sir. They did, and we actually got a check for them for the damage that they had done to the parking lot.
Because they had, I've seen quite a few equipment.
Yes, sir.
Loaded and unloaded.
Yes, sir. We went over and reviewed that with them and asked them for some funds, and they cut us a check.
Can you tell us how much that check was?
I think it was $15,000, I believe.
And what did the parking lot cost to redo?
I don't have that number right now, but I can certainly get it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
The next question I had was where was it? I don't write anything down. The second field LED lighting, what do you mean by second field?
All our high schools had at least one lighted field. Now that was
The main field.
A playing field. That was usually the football stadium. This is now we're going back and lighting at least one practice field or alternate field for each high school.
If you think back to the long-range facility plan, Mr. Meek, we put in there a line for that a number of years ago. I think the part that Terry may have left out, a number of our schools had a second lit field, and a fair number of them didn't. So as an equity issue, we budgeted over time to go back and do a second lit field at the ones that do not have one. Since we put that line in, LED lighting has come about. So the LED is just an added benefit. It's a more efficient lighting system. So the project's really about getting an equitable second lit field of school, but now the standard is LED lighting.
So they'll be able to see the ball when they practice now?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Meek, if I could interrupt, please. We've run out of time, so without objection, I'd like to extend for 10 minutes. Thank you, Mr. Meek.
Thank you. The other question I had, the secured entry projects, will they all be finished by August?
That is certainly our intentions. We're actively out there. We're under contract with 3 different firms, and we're working on them as we speak.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Anyone else? Yes. Mr. Sutter.
One additional question. On secured entry projects, without giving away any trade secrets or whatever, exactly what does that entail we say we're going to secure entry projects. What, are we talking about all entrances to school or a particular instance or one entrance? I'm just trying to understand
I think
how this involves with school safety.
I think the shortest answer to that is, Mr. Sudduth, every school already has a secured entrance. When you pass into it, in some schools, you could rather easily go over the counter and get behind the counter where the employees are and where the switch is to secure or not secure the doors. This puts a barrier up to eliminate your ability to easily do that in the places that don't have one already.
Explain that to me again, Dr. Royster. If I'm in the main office and there's someone in there.
If you walked into the main office
Okay, sir.
right now, in some schools, once you got in there, now you'd be prevented from going out the door to go in the building, but you could go across the counter because there's nothing over the top of the counter. It's just open. This goes back and places a barrier up there. You can still see through it. You can still talk to the people behind the counter, but you cannot easily get through that barrier. In fact, you can't get through it at all without tearing it up, dismantling
What's the barrier constructed of, Dr. Royster?
Generally speaking, it's a wood partition that matches the countertop in the building.
And it's a storefront mullion type system with windows in it.
We can send you a picture of what they look like. That might help to clarify the answer.
I'm trying to understand the scope because you've got to be, you can't get into that door to begin with.
Right.
Unless they let you in. You got to press the buzzer outside to get in.
Yes, sir.
And now once I'm in, now this second part
keeps you from being able to go over the counter and get to them. To get to the people behind the counter. If they were to let you in, then you started doing something or saying something that was disturbing in nature, or you tried to come across the counter, this will stop you from going across the counter. It protects the people who work in the office, and it prevents an intruder from getting over there, looking around, and finding the button to release the door.
These will be completed this summer?
As rapidly as we can get contractors engaged and get the work completed, yes, sir.
Yes, sir, that's correct.
That's our intent.
Yeah, I'm still interested in seeing how that's going to look, what that's going to
We'll send you a picture of a typical one, and I think that will help further explain it. Send that to all the board.
Okay. But we still are having the other entrances to a building are not secured.
Well, all the other doors are supposed to be secured and locked, and there should be one entrance that you go to if you're a visitor to get in.
These doors here at the front, can they be opened?
Only by someone inside who pushes the panic hardware.
Send me that, and I'd appreciate looking at that.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. I've got a few questions, if I could, Terry.
Yes, sir.
Under safety and security, let's look at Roper Mountain for a minute. At one point in time, I believe there was the intention of putting cameras on the Harrison Hall since it's been recently renovated. Are we still planning to do that?
Yes, sir. We've added all of the facilities at Roper Mountain to our camera program, and we will be doing an assessment of all the individual buildings out there, and we will put camera systems in there that will be comparable to what's in the schools.
Do we have a timeline for that?
No, sir, I don't have a timeline, but it's our objective to complete the entire program by the end of the year, camera program, I should say. So
the end of 2018?
By December, the end of
Okay.
December this year. So it will, if it's not, it will hopefully be done in that time frame. Hopefully all of them will be. We are proceeding as rapidly as possible.
Gotcha. While we're talking about Roper Mountain, what about the parking lot? Is it on a list to be resurfaced?
Not at the moment. The parking lot at Roper Mountain, we're having a study done. We're looking at utilities. We're looking at the new building we're building out there and the future CATE facility that we're building out there, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to tie these buildings together. I don't mean physically tie them together, but traffic flows, utilities, and all, and that could be, certainly will be part of the study.
Okay. On the roof replacements for the 3 schools, I'm assuming that these 3 firms are under a indefinite delivery contract?
No,
Or
sir.
they're out to bid?
It was all competitively bid.
Okay, if there's one of the firms that we ever use, say we've contracted with a firm, what do we do to check their, not their references, but their quality of installation? Previous projects.
We have, as doing part of the construction administration and quality control for these projects, we have roofing consultants that take these projects from the initial roof assessment. They help develop the specifications and drawings. They aid the process during bidding and procurement. And then they're also directly contracted with to oversee the project installation and construction. So they are our quality control firm.
But let's say one of these 3 contractors had a rather questionable performance record on installed projects.
Well,
how do you find that out?
We certainly could look into the background of that. As you well know, in the construction industry, unless you personally, as an owner, have an issue with a contractor and for various reasons that you blacklist them, for a better expression, we haven't done that to any of these 3 firms, to my knowledge. But you can get a good job, you can get a bad job, and I understand your concern.
Well, and just for clarity for everyone else, my concern is this. By virtue of the fact that I used to work in the roofing industry, I know all 3 of these firms.
Yes, sir.
At one point in time, one of these firms had a horrible record of successful completion and quality performance. And I don't want to buy somebody else's bad habits.
I understand.
So if we don't have a process to check the inspections of some of these guys' previous jobs, and if they're all inspected, if they're all warranted by the manufacturer, which they should be, then the manufacturer has to inspect them.
Correct.
So there's a paper trail.
Yes, sir.
I would encourage us in the future to identify a way to check those previous jobs, especially for firms that we don't deal with on a regular basis. Now, the one I've got a concern about, they may have cleaned their act up.
I think I know who you're referring to.
But I just don't want us to end up owning somebody else's bad habits.
Yes, sir, I understand.
You got on the list Lake Forest, the new floor in the gym.
Yes,
sir. What are we
sir.
putting down there?
It's a new rubberized floor.
Similar to what Taylor's has got down?
I would have to look at Taylor's.
But it's a rubberized
Yes,
pad.
sir, it's a rubberized floor.
And why are we rebidding the Hillcrest greenhouse?
The Hillcrest greenhouse came in at approximately 50% higher than what we paid for the greenhouse structure at Woodmont.
Okay.
And subsequently, we canceled the bid and rebid it. And we only had one bidder at that time. We canceled that bid and we have rebid it. We received those bids, and the low bid now is $28,000 higher than the single bid that we got before.
That's what happens when you have a lack of a competitive market.
Well, like I said, we had 2 bidders this time.
And that is a very niche business, and
Yes,
so
sir.
there's very few people in it. So.
Yes, sir. Well, we're in some discussions and conversations, and we may have to cancel this bid and maybe try to bid this during a more opportune time of the year.
Okay. When we visited Rudolph Gordon, I believe Mrs. Goodwin Caldwell and I both shared some concerns about where some of the classes were laid out. This is my last question. Did we as a board have a chance to look at that design before it went to the construction phase?
Yes, sir. I believe we did review that project. and had a presentation to the board. I'm not sure how in-depth it was, but there was certainly an opportunity provided.
Okay. Well, I'm sharing this with you as I have shared with other owners in other districts in my capacity in my profession. Putting special education on the second floor is crazy.
I understand your position.
And so I would, if there's a creative way that we can address that, I don't know that you can. And if we can't, I would certainly hope that other schools in the future, Fountain Inn High School and anything else that we're going to build from the ground up, we work to make sure that the design firm doesn't provide us with that recommendation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mrs. Bush?
Ms. Bush? Oh, can I extend for 5 minutes without objection? Okay. Go ahead.
Talking about resurfacing of parking lot, do we have a list of resurfacing, much like we do the roofing?
Yes, ma'am. We went out 3 years ago and did an assessment of every square yard of asphalt paving across the district, driveways, parking lots, and we have them all ranked. And based on based on needs, based on complaints that we're getting, we repair parking lots. There is a systematic process in place. Like I said, though, there may be some. It's not a stagnant thing. There's weather conditions, other uses, this, that, and the other can make the reassessment of individual parking lots necessary. And so we bring up a few projects every year. We have a budget for that, $750,000 a year, and we try to expend that paving.
I don't know. I have had some comments from the Berea Elementary
Yes, ma'am.
School parking lot, and I didn't know if there. I know that we have like the roofing schedule and the HVAC schedule and things like that, and I know that we've done some kind of pothole repairs there.
Yes, ma'am.
But I said we'll check and see because that was back before Best. I think that was one of the last schools that we built before Best. So.
Well, one of the things that you may recall, Ms. Bush, we mentioned this, it's been several years ago now, though. Best left us with the best program facilities entered into a database. But it didn't include all the building components, nor did it include the pre-best buildings. So one of the things, and that was what Terry was alluding to earlier about going back and assessing the condition of asphalt paving throughout the district, that was one of the things that was not included in the best program documentation, nor obviously in the pre-best. So we've gone back now and picked that up, and we believe we've captured every building component that we have, and they're all on a list. And as you know, that MARS allocation each year is how we fund that ongoing list. Now again, to Terry's point, sometimes with weather and traffic, that asphalt, the deterioration can speed or it can slow. And then some of it depends on, he didn't really get into that, but when they tore out that parking lot at Serene, there was no base.
Yeah.
The base was the ground. So that obviously contributed to the short lifespan of that parking lot. So now we build them to a spec. Terry's people look at the intended usage. Is it a delivery drive, heavy truck usage? Is it a bus drive, heavy bus usage? Is it mixed use? Is it light car traffic? They look at all that in doing the specs for the replacement.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Hearing nothing else.
One more, Mr.
Yes, sir.
Just one question. Why
Yes,
are
sir.
we building a guidance office addition at Malden?
We're not, Mr. Sutton. What we're doing is making some changes to the entrance into the guidance office to make it more secure, and we are there was a large book room at Malden High School that's no longer being used, and it's in the administration area. They actually had 2 guidance employees working basically out of a closet. So we're creating a couple of office spaces for them in that book room area.
Thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thanks, Pat. Anything else? Okay, thank you for your indulgence, ladies and gentlemen. We'll move on now to item 4.02, the renewal of lease agreement between the School District of Greenville County and Slater Marietta Elementary School. There is a recommended motion. Is there someone willing to make that motion?
Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Bush.
I recommend the motion to approve the lease agreement between the school district and the county of Greenville for after-hours use of the park area located at Slater Marietta Elementary School for a period of 5 years beginning June 2018.
I have a motion properly made and duly seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Madam Chairman, we are through with the building and grounds portion, and I turn the meeting back over to you.
Thank you very much. There is no other business, so I would entertain a motion to adjourn. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All those in favor of adjournment, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And we are adjourned. I would like to recommend that we take about a, would y'all like to take a 5-minute break or go ahead and call to order and take the break on the way to executive session? That'd be okay. Let's go ahead and call to order the special called meeting for the purposes of evaluation of our internal auditor. And I would accept a motion to go into executive session for that purpose. I have a motion. Do I have a second? Is there any discussion? The motion is to go into executive session for the purpose of evaluating the internal auditor.
Thank you.
All those in favor of going into executive session for that purpose, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And the motion carries. And we will move slowly to the room across the hall in case anyone needs a break on the way. Thank you. Order and turn it over to Ms. Bush to summarize, please.
Yes, thank you very much. We had a executive session. We had the discussion of the auditor's evaluation, which came up with an excellent rating once again for Mr. Barber. And do I hear I wanted to thank him for all the hard work that he and his staff put into bringing us our audits and the audit calendar. And do I hear a motion?
Madam Chairman.
Yes.
I move that we provide Mr. Barber the same percentage salary increase as everyone else in the district received in this last budget.
Second. A motion and several seconds. All those, is there any discussion?
Debbie, we're in open session. Crystal's got to conduct the meeting.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
Thank you for the motion and the second. Is there any further discussion or any further comments by board members? Hearing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And the motion carries. Thank you very much, Mr. Barber and board members.
Madam. Second.
Have a motion and a second to adjourn. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, no. And we are adjourned. Thank you. Hey, Tammy Whitehouse is...
Right, she's on vacation this week.